So for the folks online, give us just a minute while some folks get seated.
People keep
I'm really, she's been, yeah, I like, I turned on, which you've done, Twitter and citation, and she's already.
You good, John?
Program's ready to go for fall, so I'll go over with.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. You either intentionally or by chance have wandered into 2023, the year we stop listing tech competencies and start layering them. Of course, one of our first activities is gonna be to list tech competencies, so, you know, good on us. But curricular development through a new framework. So I am Kris Niedringhaus. I am at Georgia State University, and your other folks are going to be Patrick Parsons at Georgia State University and Michelle Dewey at Georgia State University. So it's Georgia State all the time. Welcome.
Even on the slides.
Even on the slides. So what is tech competency? That is where we're going to start, right? Everybody's been talking about this for quite a while. So we have the obligatory ABA Model Rule 1.1 Comment 8 slide. No, it's that goes to. This is what I work with. So, you know, you all know this. Comment 8 is the comment to the competency rule that says you should be tech competent. And that's pretty much all it says. So now we're going to do an interactive exercise. Yay! So you can either scan the QR code, you can go to menti.com and enter this code. And what you're going to do is create a word cloud. So we would like you to put in what you think a skill or some knowledge or something that makes up tech competency, and you probably have more than one. So just put them in as separate entries, and then I'll give everybody a chance to get on, and then I'll open up Menti for us. How are we doing?
You have a Charlie Harper phone.
Oh, okay, it will still. Everybody, are we good? Okay. So, yeah, so you guys are making a word cloud about what is legal tech competency. And you can see that there are a lot of different things that come into that. Keep going.
Play along at home.
Right, play along at home. E-discovery is getting bigger. AI. Man, I haven't mentioned.
AI is like in the center.
Right.
Growing in the center.
I haven't had to mention ChatGPT yet. I thought I was going to get away with that. Office, accidental disclosure, competent searching. E-discovery is giving AI a run for its money. Office.
Yeah, Microsoft is in there a lot in different ways,
Yeah.
but I feel like if you concatenated them, they would take up a pretty large word space.
Right. So you guys can keep going. This is pretty cool.
Starting to get
So
motion sickness.
starting to make you motion sickness. We'll be passing out Dramamine next. So the point of doing this, and I'm going to leave it up just a little bit longer, is to point out that when people talk about tech competency, it's not very well defined, and different things come to mind for different people depending upon their context or their job or their role or what they're preparing their students for. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, and let's talk a little bit more about that. So, you know, Comment 8 came out quite a while. What has it been, like 12 years ago now? 40 states have affirmatively adopted the comment, and then the other states probably would still recognize it under their current competency standard. The problem is, there hasn't been a clear definition. Like, we're not all talking about the same thing whenever we talk about tech competency. So there have been different models. Depending upon how old you are, you might remember the I-shaped lawyer, and then the T-shaped lawyer, and, are you laughing?
No, I just wanted
We have, like YMCA over here. The Delta model, and they've all been sort of different iterations of trying to get people to become more tech competent, but not really, there hasn't been a common language for what tech competency means. And when we were talking about how to put together the curriculum, every time we would have a conversation, we would get caught up in, well, this is what I'm talking about, and somebody else is talking about somebody else when we're talking about tech competency. And so those models haven't really given us, they've lacked that definition. And so our goal with this was to create a model that would give some definition to what tech competency looks like and how you might measure that in different contexts and for different roles, and to not just create something that you could measure an individual's tech competency, but that you could also use to create for course development or curriculum development, something like that. So what happens?
She hates animations.
Does it stop
Which is
at
why
some point? Patrick. Does it stop at some
No.
Never.
So the problem is that we don't have a baseline, right? What is the minimum, bare minimum that someone has? I'm trying very hard to ignore this, and you'll get eventually. But what happens, because we don't have that vocabulary, we're not talking about the same thing, is there's an inability to have a really good in-depth conversation, because first you have to have that whole conversation about what do we mean by tech competency. And we need a framework. And so that is what we tried to come up with our model, is a way that we can all talk about tech competency and figure out what we need. And now I'm gonna hit the button so we don't have to watch this anymore.
I like the spinning guy, but at some point he gets a little old. So I don't know if anybody was in here, in actually the other room earlier where David was like, all models are bad. And I was like, yeah, but this is a framework, which is different, right? There's actually like a technical difference in like software development between a model and a framework. Frameworks are more about the way that we can think through something. So it isn't necessarily like this very structured thing. It's a way that we can think against where the skills are. So when you go back to that word cloud, right? At the bottom there's this base. That base stands for basic application and software expectations. And that's really those things that everybody was kind of putting in, right? There were some shared things that I think we can all kind of agree are just really fundamental. And for us, we don't even necessarily think of those as tech skills. They're more just traditional business or lawyering skills that just are not able anymore to be separated from technology because of the way that we communicate, the way that we draft, the way that we interact with each other. So that's kind of the base, and I think that's like the shared thing that would be true for all practitioners. But after that, it gets really muddy, right? If I'm a small firm family law lawyer, that's very different than a big law person. That's very different than somebody working in, a legal technology space like AI, blockchain, cybersecurity. So we have these graduated layers, and they're not necessarily hierarchical, but they're different ways to think based on the taxonomy, like how you go from know, integrate, to create. And so Patrick will talk a little bit more about what each of those mean. But at the base level, what we're really looking at are sort of the types of skills that I think initiated with, when you think way back to like the legal tech audit, right? Which is kind of where this conversation really started to become more popularized. And so those are really those things that we saw in the word cloud that were like Microsoft Office, email etiquette, basic understanding of the security of the platforms that you're using to communicate. Those things, it really doesn't matter where you practice, it really doesn't matter what you do. Those are the things I think we can all kind of get into agreement about. And maybe that's the place where we can work together to kind of carve out a little bit of a clear list. After that, it's really more about applying the framework based on where you're coming from. And so you should be able to use this.
Sorry, we have to go back for a minute.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I forgot that you were going to the next slide.
No, it's fine. Hi, everyone. So just to take a step back for a minute and give a little bit more context. This whole thing came out of Michelle and Kris and I's work with the Georgia State Legal Analytics and Innovation Initiative. About a year and a half ago, we all started working with legal tech education on a sort of day-to-day basis. And like Kris and Michelle both sort of alluded to, we started having conversations about legal tech education. And as they both sort of said, we found very quickly that we weren't talking about the same things. We'd be talking about legal tech courses, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna do this thing in my course. I'm teaching this tech competency thing. And Michelle would be like, wait, what? And she would not really understand what I was saying. She would have a sort of a different definition of tech competency. Or I'd be talking about some skill, and she'd be thinking of it in a completely different way, or at a completely different level. And we really identified two main problems that we were having in communication. And those two main problems were, one, that we did not have, or that when we talked about legal tech competency, teaching legal technology, that the terminology, the term legal tech was so expansive that it was almost unusable. That legal tech is humongous. As you saw by the word cloud, we all have, 30 different terms just for legal tech competency, 30 different concepts that we're all using. So when we talk about teaching legal tech or legal tech competency, it's really hard. It's such a broad term that, it's really difficult to use in doing things like developing skills, developing curriculum. The other thing being that we started realizing that legal tech competency was really sort of different from person to person, from attorney to attorney, from law student to law student, from class to class. Different courses needed different levels of instruction. Different attorneys needed different levels of skills. In response, we developed this model. And as Michelle said, it starts with the base. The base is sort of an agreed upon foundation that all lawyers need to have. And as Michelle said, these skills tend to not even really be tech skills. They're really things that all lawyers have always had to do. Like a good example being client information. Like, you could never just give people access to client files. You couldn't just let people come into your office and be like, hey, look through my files. Like, that's not any different now because they can do it through technology. Like, just because it's under the umbrella of cybersecurity doesn't make the process any different just because it has a technical aspect to it. So these are things, these base skills are things that all lawyers need to have and need to understand because they are key to the ethical and sort of foundational things that you need to be able to do as a legal professional. But beyond this exists all these other tech skills and all these other tech courses and all these other tech programs. And this is where we were really having difficulty talking to each other. So we created this model sort of in response as a way to kind of just to be able to talk to each other. And it has two main features in sort of response to the problems that we were having. One being topical quadrants. So again, legal tech as a concept, entirely too big. So we split it into 4. Granted, infinity divided by 4, still infinity, but it's less. And it's honestly, somehow, yeah, but it's been helpful. So we split the entire universe of legal tech up into 4 topical quadrants. Those being, as you can see in the model, and this is the same model, it's just from different perspectives. Those quadrants being practice technology, data, automation, and efficiency, and emerging tech. Just a brief overview of, definitional overview of those. Practice tech being fundamental tasks in the practice of law, things like practice management, cybersecurity, document management, legal ops. Data being numbers and computation and its usage in practice. Automation and efficiency, basic streamlining and optimization of practice and processes and routine tasks, including concepts like process improvement and document automation. And then finally, emerging tech, things, technology and concepts fundamentally changing how we practice. And this class category is constantly changing and acts a bit of a catch-all for things that don't quite fit. And granted, like these 4 topics aren't perfect. Not everything fits squarely into all of them or any of them, and there's some overlap, but we do find it useful to be able to identify different skills and to be able to put them into different categories. And it's been able to ease communication issues between us by categorizing things this way.
I'd also say, like in the word cloud, like AI was in the center, which I think is interesting because AI is also in all of these. Like I don't think you can really separate that out anymore.
Right. And then the other feature is something we call graduated levels, which you can see are the know, integrate, and create levels. And this is sort of a takeoff of Bloom's taxonomy. Anybody familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? Lots of people?
Preaching of Bloom's taxonomy class.
Yeah, and for those of you unfamiliar, Bloom's taxonomy is a sort of a pedagogical tool for creating learning objectives and lesson plans using action verbs. I'm really bad at explaining Bloom's taxonomy. I feel like I screw this up every time I do it, but basically like at the bottom of the pyramid are very basic verbs like understand, and the higher you go on the pyramid, the more intellectually challenging the verbs are. Capping at the top with the most intellectually challenging verbs like synthesize. So we did a similar thing with these, with the verbs at the bottom being know, going to integrate, and then create. And this representing sort of a graduated level of how either law students or courses or programming interact with legal tech or legal tech skills. One thing to note, we don't see this as sort of something to strive for. There is a top level. Top level isn't like something that students are all striving for. This is more of a realization of where different students or different legal professionals need to be in regards to their own individual situations. I think one thing that's important is that, all lawyers have different tech needs and different needs for tech competencies in different areas at different levels. Some lawyers might have a graduated need for knowledge for practice systems. They're doing more in legal ops than others. And would need, say, a integrate level at the practice technology level, but only a know level in something like data. One example, I figured I'd run like a quick example just in the data level. So if I was going to explain this using something like a concept like, let's say, legal analytics. So if I was going to do legal analytics, maybe at the know level would be knowledge, general knowledge of legal analytics platforms and kind of how they work and sort of the data sets they're built off of, sort of like surface level knowledge of legal analytics. Integrate would be a graduated knowledge or graduated ability to use those platforms to integrate them into practice or their day-to-day activities. And then at the create level would be the ability to actually create their own legal analytics tools using their own data sources or data sources from other places. Now I know this is kind of a lot. I just shot like a lot of things, a lot of like theoretical stuff. So we are going to run some examples to try to have this make a little bit more sense and show you like how the model actually, or how the framework, I'm not saying model now
Because all models are bad.
yeah, we're going to run some examples to show you sort of how the framework will actually work in developing curriculum and looking at programs and also sort of like auditing courses that you might be teaching. But at this point, does anybody have any just general questions or things that we could clarify? Yeah.
I have one basic question.
Yeah.
Is what does base mean?
Oh,
Basic
Is it somewhere? It was said
application,
right at the beginning, basic application. but-
basic applications and software expectations.
Yeah.
We actually have a different name for it when we talk amongst ourselves.
Can I tell them? Basic math skills.
Yeah.
That's what we say.
Not so much a question, but if the goal is competence, I think it would be helpful to have more stages of competence up to integration, but creates a different skill set, takes an entirely different set of knowledge. To me, it's analogous to competent is being able to pass your driver's ed test, doesn't mean I can rebuild my Hemi, right? And so I would really discourage us from saying the ultimate competence of a lawyer is to become a Python programmer and separate out those two worlds.
Well, that's exactly what we're saying is not true. Like, not everyone, create isn't necessarily better than know, just because they're stacked on top of each other. It's at a higher knowledge level, but not everyone needs to reach that. And
And my pushback is it's not at a higher one, it's at a different stack. But where the starting point is coding, it's software, it's not law.
it doesn't have to be though. You can create without knowing coding.
So also, I think create too, what create is, right, is gonna be different for different attorneys. So there are people who will end up like being super sophisticated in different ways, but that might be because of the area that they practice or their own personal goals in terms of what they want, at what level of competency they want, right? Base is like that minimum ethical standard, but create could also be like, for data, create could be creating like a data visualization that you might have to use in court or, to present to a client. That's not like the basic competency, but different practice areas and different attorneys, I think, want different levels of competency. And so when you're thinking about curricular development, part of what you have to think about is which lawyers are you training? For some people, you'll only ever teach them base skills and that's the only thing they'll ever need to know, and that's fine. There's not a judgment, I think, in there. It's just thinking about that connection between what they're practicing, where they're practicing, and maybe personal goals and desires.
Yeah.
Well, I would add prerequisites, and
Yeah.
that's where I think, right, if you can't teach it in law school, is it a lawyer competency?
And we have some examples. We have some examples of some things we've done with it and ways we planned curriculum with our program and used it to sort of map what we're doing in terms of like higher skill level programming that we have. So it might clarify some things or make it more accessible or more relevant to what is possible for lawyers. Okay. So now just to make this all more practical, more relevant to what everyone is doing, I'd like to talk about a couple of examples. One in terms of programs, and then specifically because the program is titled Curricular Development Courses, and then people. Looking forward, we're actually not going to talk about people because we have two class examples and no people examples. But you can use this in the same way as we'll use it for courses to look at actual competency levels for different types of people. So different types of attorneys needing different competency levels and different skills. And we'd be happy to talk more about that if you'd like to at the end in terms of questions. But moving forward, so programs, this is one way that we use it at Georgia State. As I said before, Kris, Michelle, and I are all in charge of working with the Legal Analytics and Innovation Initiative. So we're in charge of the legal tech programming at Georgia State. And without getting too much into it, we run a Legal Analytics and Innovation Certificate Program, which is basically we have a 2-track certificate program. It's either Legal Analytics or Legal Tech and Innovation. Legal Analytics being more computationally based, where they do a final course where they do a larger scale data project. Legal Tech and Innovation being a more tech and process oriented path. So it's very important to us that they come out of this program not just having talked about legal tech, but actually have done legal tech things, have obtained real legal tech skills. Whether those are sort of computational data project skills, or in the class that Michelle teaches, and we'll talk about in a second, legal process skills. And so what I've done here is I sort of just mapped out all the classes that we have in our program. And these are shorthand, so I don't expect you to know them. But generally, starting from the top, LPE is Legal Process Engineering, which is Michelle's class. It's the capstone for our Tech and Innovation path, which is, she'll talk about it, but it's a great class. They do legal process engineering, so like process improvement. They sort of develop, I'm off the cuff going to do a really bad job of describing the class. She'll talk about it, it's great. Legal Lab is the Legal Analytics Lab course where they develop a larger scale legal analytics project. You can see they are all at the Create level. LA1 is our Legal Analytics 1 class. Text is our text analytics class we have that we offer through partnership with the business school. And then all around the no level, the intro is our Intro to Tech and Innovation course, which is a class that I teach. It's sort of just the survey level legal tech course. And then all the other classes are doctrinal courses taught by mostly tenure faculty or adjuncts that we kind of backfill the elective requirements of the certificate program. And this is useful for me in a couple of ways. As I said, it's really important for us that they develop skills through this program. So it's important to me that we have knowledge level development at all three levels. So know where they're just sort of developing surface knowledge, where they're learning sort of the landscape of whatever course they're taking. If they're taking a cybersecurity course, and they're just kind of learning the sort of law around cybersecurity, or sort of the cybersecurity basics, up to Create, where they're developing their own legal analytics project. One thing that I didn't intend when I made this slide, so I mapped all these classes, and you sort of notice that we have pretty good offerings at the no level. So students have a lot of opportunity to just get sort of surface, no level knowledge. We have pretty good at the Create level. So we've got a couple different capstone classes where they are really like creating their own things. We're not doing real great at the Integrate level. I sort of didn't realize that until I made this. And I was like, well, I guess I'll show everybody that we're not doing that great at the Integrate level.
That's the purpose of it, right?
But yeah, that's sort of the purpose of it, and that is kind of driving our curricular development into the future now at a programmatic level, is that we need more classes that allow students to have graduated skill development that don't require a lot of prerequisites. So all of our Create level classes have at least usually one prerequisite in the curriculum. We need something where students can engage in more projects and more things like that, and get Integrate level skills in the certificate program without having to have a bunch of prerequisites. So that's sort of what we're looking at now, and things that we can do to beef up our Integrate level program offerings. So that's one way that you can use the model to sort of look at your programmatic offerings and program development.
So I took a slightly different approach when I was thinking about it at the course level, because I had to think about the different areas, and these are just some examples I came up with of like specific skills in the different domains that I wanted my students to be able to have from the class. And so I just kind of like, mapped out like what should they get from the class. Oh, I guess I have to explain it since you did it. But the class generally is just sort of it's called Legal Process Engineering. Like Patrick said, it's our capstone class. And it's generally a sort of design thinking, project management class where we, look at business skills, design thinking skills, project management skills through the lens of using technology to solve legal problems or challenges in the operational practice of law.
And they worked with real
real firm clients. So they had problems from real life. They had, business sponsors from firms who said, this is my challenge. And then they, through the course of the class, worked through solving those problems. And so I thought, like, what skills will they need? And for my class, it had to be a moving target. So I had to kind of come up with the basic things, but I knew I was going to have to reevaluate it too once they decided what their actual solutions were, because there might be another layer of skills or knowledge that they were going to need to actually execute on their plan. But at the base, I started to think about, here's what they need going in week 1. And then it doesn't really matter if you can read them now, because the point is just to show you how I thought about each of the things, and then I thought, what level do they need to know these things? Like, I need to teach to make sure that they understand data sources. Do they need to just have like, data sources exist? Or do they need to be like, I need to understand where data comes from and like how to evaluate it? No, they actually needed like a higher level. They needed to understand how various data sources could integrate with other either practices, like actual actions they were doing as lawyers, or other tools that they were using. And then same thing, like I wanted them to be able to create stuff. At a minimum, maybe they were gonna end up creating something, maybe they weren't. I don't remember what program I was in earlier, but people were talking about like, I think it was yours, where it's like you have to be able to fail. First thing I told them day 1 is like, success is not that you end up with a successful project, right? The success is that you made it through the project. But there were things I wanted them to be able to create, like a data visualization, like a process map. So what is it that you want them to be able to create? What is it that you need them to know at an integrate level? What is it like vocab that you just need them to have knowledge of?
Okay. All right. We're going to try to do something that might fail. Full disclosure. Woo! Okay. So, first of all, we try not to be overly prescriptive about how to use this model. We're trying to give some suggestions, but we're really just trying to create a framework on how to create common ground to talk about tech competency, tech skills at a graduated level with different topical areas. One thing we provided, we gave a worksheet out. The worksheet's design, it's actually something we created pretty recently. Does anybody have a copy? If you don't have a copy, would you like a copy?
We only have one.
It's also online for those people online or people who are sitting here that would like to look at it electronically.
Yeah, so that it sort of represents one way to use the model, the framework in course development. And it's sort of a backwards design approach. If you're familiar with backwards design, it allows you to sort of set goals for your course. And then from there, you sort of pick what knowledge level you think you need or you'd like to teach for that course. So any tech course, and then you just kind of pick for each topical category which knowledge level you'd like to teach up to, and then set goals briefly, and then sort of figure out what level you'd like to do. So that's one way. We're going to try a slightly different because we figured everybody, a lot of people. So who in this room teaches a tech course already? Raise hands. 1, 2, some, a few. Okay. Who teaches like an intro to tech, like law practice technology course? All right, great. So I'm gonna need all of your help. We're gonna use guinea pigs.
Who wants to teach an intro?
Yeah, who wants to teach an intro to
But
tech
does
course?
it?
Like thinking about it.
Why are
Yeah.
the rest of you here?
Curious?
Just curious.
Curiosity?
Okay, so let's say we're thinking about teaching an intro to tech course. Like a law practice technology course, sort of like a basic survey course. We're gonna talk about a bunch of tech topics. Maybe we're gonna introduce some legal tech, office skills. What are some general goals? What would a goal be? Just anything. Anyone? Yeah.
Know how to learn to find how to do something in the future.
I
Okay.
love that. We talk a lot about how so much of tech competency is actually just like a mindset of understanding how to move through new experiences.
Think how often MS Office changes a
Yeah.
moving target, right?
Literally
So-
just, my example I always give my students is like, you don't have to necessarily know how to do every single thing in Excel, right? You have to understand what Excel can do so that if you find yourself doing something, you can be like, Patrick has an actual live story of this, right? There has to be a better way. And then you just Google, how do I? And you can figure it out. But if you don't understand sort of generally what the tools in the marketplace can do, you can't engage that mindset.
Okay, what would another like big course goal be? Like, I'm gonna teach a course about legal technology. This is what I'd like to accomplish. Yeah.
Awareness of the tools that are available.
Okay. Awareness of the tools that are available. Okay. All right, we got 2. How about one more? How about something advanced? Yeah.
Ethical use of those tools.
Ethical use of tools. All right, great. Let's think as a group of like, I don't know, a few lessons that might further these overall goals. What are some things that we might want to talk about? Either modules or like big lessons that would contribute to these goals. Anybody? Yeah.
I have my students do a research paper where they have to go, they find a blog, find a software they don't know, explore it themselves, write a paper and explain it to the rest of the class. So it accomplishes my, how do I learn about something, and also making themselves aware of something that they didn't know existed.
Okay, so let's do like, how do I find, what can we call this? We can't like, I can't write that whole thing out, Doug.
Research and explanation.
Yeah.
Come on, I expect that whole paragraph.
All right, research and explanation exercise. Yeah.
So one way to do it would be to give the students, put them in small teams, give them a monthly budget for licenses, and tell them that they're starting up a firm, and now they have to spend that money for the tools that'll make their firm the most efficient.
Okay. So firm tech budgeting, tools budgeting. Firm tech tools budgeting. All right. What else? It can be an exercise. It can just be a topic. It can be like e-discovery. Yeah.
Workflow.
Workflow. I'm not picking these colors based on anything either. I'm just picking. Other stuff. Other things we'd like to talk about in our completely made up class. This class could be a complete failure too. Like, this is not how you make a class. I mean, I guess it could be, but yeah.
Trial presentations.
Trial presentations.
Trizile. We're very hip in Georgia. Atlanta.
Trial presentations. All right, let's try to get like 2 more. How about from this side of the room? Yeah.
Privacy.
Privacy. All right, how about something from the middle? We've been very middle light. The biggest
I
chunk.
see nobody sat in the scholar's chair.
Because when I sat down, he was in it.
What about our ethical goal?
Time and billing.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Want to pay back those student
All
loans?
right, time and billing and cybersecurity. All right, so we've got, let's pick a nice blue one. Okay, so now if we were going to map this class, we would take all these things that we decided we wanted to talk about. We would figure out first sort of what one of these topical categories they fit under, and then at what level we wanted to teach them. Because it's important. Sometimes when we teach these tech classes, we have these great ideas. We're like, oh, we're going to teach them how to do this very difficult skill. It ends up taking a tremendous amount of time, and it ends up sort of taking away from the overall goals of the class because it takes so much time. It actually pulls away from the things that we overall wanted to accomplish. So let's start. Cybersecurity. we usually put that under practice technology. For this overall course with our goals, what level do you think we would do? Would it be know, integrate, create, or would it be like a base skill?
Can I ask a question? We are presuming this is just like a everyman course, every person?
Yeah, it's an intro to tech or a law practice technology course. What do you think? Anybody have any thoughts?
Integrate.
Integrate? Yeah, I think so. Cybersecurity? So if we taught it as like, what would a cybersecurity integrate lesson look like? Like, to me, a cybersecurity integrate lesson would involve some sort of like
Data.
What's that?
I would say it's data.
You would say it's data?
Yeah, I would say cybersecurity would be data.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Because cybersecurity really is just entailing who can access data, when they can access it, and how they access it.
Right. So if we're going to teach students how to integrate cybersecurity into a practice, like what would that look like? I'm not a cybersecurity expert at all.
So you're talking about data minimization, you're talking about vendor assessments, you're talking about HIPAA,
Right.
FERPA, GLBA requirements.
Right.
And how to set that up so that, again, they're not creating any of the tools, they're managing the vendors who are making sure that they meet all those external requirements.
Right.
Try to scam your students with a phishing email.
I was gonna say you have to cover passwords though. Like that's too advanced. You have to go basic too, and start up like have good passwords. Don't write your passwords down on a Post-it and put it next to your computer. Like have different passwords for everybody else.
Isn't that best practice?
And have to go.
Look, I'll tell you, I worked in an AmLaw 100 law firm, and I can't even tell you how many of our attorneys like use like their same password over and over again, and like their banking password for Westlaw, despite the fact that we would regularly be like, you cannot do that.
My favorite was somebody who wrote the password on a Post-it note and used it to cover the camera on their laptop.
So also, to be fair, like if you're teaching something to integrate, there's obviously some fundamental knowledge that comes with that. So that's part of the assessment you have to figure out too. Like, so for me in my class, if you notice, like a lot of my Post-it notes, because I had a subset of students, were in the integrate and create part. So I had to also figure out, what do I need to tell them? Or what do I need to make sure they already know? So like Patrick's class is a prerequisite for mine, right? Because I can't spend the time teaching them that stuff.
Yeah.
But if there are gaps where he doesn't cover something in his class, like you may have to layer that, right? In order to get to the integrate level, which is the output you want, there may be levels below that you have to make sure are filled either by you in your course or by understanding that they're getting that somewhere else and bringing it into your course.
Yeah. I think this is awesome. Like this would be an awesome lesson to teach. But also like it's the kind of lesson where if you're teaching, it depends on how many classes you teach, it depends on how many credits the class is, and how much time you have allocated to other things. Because if you have to spend, if it's let's say it's a 2-credit class and you have 1 2-hour class a week, and cybersecurity is gonna take, that kind of lesson, maybe that takes 2 weeks to really execute that whole lesson plan, to teach it, to do the exercise, that is 2 out of your 15 weeks, that's a big chunk of your class. So then when you go and you map all of your courses on the rubric, or let's say you go through and you map all the lessons you have on the framework, and you look and you'll be able to see that you have, integrate level cybersecurity, you'll be able to see how everything lines up. And it'll better show you sort of how everything in your course kind of squares against everything else. And it sort of will better allow you to make those sorts of decisions. And we can I guess we can continue and see like how this is all going to kind of work out. But like time and billing, I would say time and billing is sort of practice technology. Where would we put time and billing? Does anybody?
Practice technology, integrate.
What's the difference in practice technology and automation efficiency?
Practice technology, we usually use practice technology as shorthand for things that are just fundamental to practice, whereas automation and efficiency are things that actively automate everyday processes. So there's some overlap in terms of...
So client management and billing is which?
Practice management, or practice technology, right? Like matter management, time and billing management, legal ops stuff.
Yeah, we usually use that. We usually talk about that in terms of practice technology.
And automation efficiency might be something like contract automation.
So efficiency is actually built on top of that
Right.
rather than being separate from it.
Yeah.
So if it's a new AI feature that tracks your time, is it emerging technology or
It could be both.
practice technology,
I mean, I think that,
automation?
I think like the domains matter less because you might even have totally different sort of domains for yourself. I think it's more thinking about like, how can you break apart the content that you want to teach into areas where you can think about separate spaces and then kind of think about where on sort of the ladder of whether you need them to just kind of know some things, some vocab that this concept is, whether you need them to actually be able to do something with that knowledge, or whether something needs to be produced from it. And again, the production could be a visual, just like a data visualization in Tableau, or it could be like I coded a thing, because all the students are different, right? The standard for a GSU grad is not coding a thing. The standard for an LAII certificate grad might be.
Yeah, and like workflow would probably be like automation and efficiency. Let's just say we have to have some things at the no level.
Right. You can't have everything at integrate because you're not gonna have time in the semester to do that. And so, yeah, a lot of these things, they could be put in different quadrants and then you have to choose which level you want. And part of that, unfortunately, is just gonna have to do with how much time you have, right? So you need to pick and choose which ones you want to be at a higher level and which ones are okay. And remember, this is an intro course. So, it's okay for it to be, for some of these to be at the no level, because this is just starting them off in the topic.
And I think maybe the competency, like when we're talking about like common 8 competency, maybe for the most part, that really is just base sprinkled in with some no, which is like, marketplace no, right? Like, you should know like the basic fundamentals of how generative AI works so you don't find yourself being brought up in court. Some sanctionable actions.
Somebody have a question in the back?
Yeah. I was just curious, I think this is a really helpful way to think out planning a class. Have you ever had an instance though where you like planned it out, like you had the different things set up and then you get, and the class is just, I don't mean to sound this negatively, but like they are not at the level. They are
too basic.
They are not there. Have you, like, how have you been able to adjust this kind of on the fly after you kind of put in the really good and thoughtful planning?
100%. So this class I taught this semester, I think it went really great. Every day after class, I was like, oh my God, I have to do so many things different next year, like immediately, because it is hard to know. And the thing is that next year when I teach it, I'm not gonna have the same 10 students, right? So they aren't gonna have the thing. One of the things I did before the class started, like before their first day, is I gave them some self-assessments and asked them about different concepts and different technologies, and I asked them to tell me like if they had done something with that before, if they had seen someone else do it before, if they had heard about it, or if they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I was able to kind of look at. The other thing that I think is also important, and it was important for my students to understand, is at the end of the day, right, there isn't going to be one person who actually is going to be an expert in all these spaces, right? So I also use that information to put my students collectively in teams, because in real life, like when I worked in a firm and I worked with an innovation team, it wasn't like, I'm not like an expert coder, right? I worked with people who were coders. I worked with people who did, development and, app dev, and I brought a different skill set, right? And so it's also about understanding all the roles and then trying to find like a balance for some of those skills. So putting them together to learn from each other and balance off each other's strengths helped.
And just to kind of pull it all together, I know we're about at question time, but like I put this one together. I teach an intro to tech class every fall, and I have like my real goal is to just have the sort of no level understanding of like a broad survey of topics, and to have sort of like no plus almost integrate level for like evaluation of legal tech products, and no plus for some like basic data skills. So this is kind of how I mapped out my class, with no plus being at practice technology, and sort of like no like right on the line for data, and then just mapping my different lessons sort of this way.
There's an example, like one side of the sheet is blank and there's an example for the intro to legal tech class on the back.
Yeah, I think it's the same example.
Yeah.
So,
Just a different one.
but yeah.
I also think it's, so Michelle just said that every week after class she would come back and write down all the things that she needed to change. But I got to watch their final presentations from their projects and they were amazing.
Those students were awesome.
So tell them the 2 projects.
So one team worked with a small estate planning firm in rural Georgia. So obviously they don't have anything. They had, I think, tried at one point to use a Microsoft integration for form automation, and they spent more time correcting the documents than it created any efficiency, so they were just like, we don't want to do this. So they actually gave the students their standard intake form and one of their healthcare directive forms that they typically use. The students interviewed them to find out about the workflow, and then they went out and researched a bunch of different products on the market, got down to try to identify a couple that they wanted to get trial access to do what we call a bake-off, and actually run the documents through the various programs, and then ultimately assess how it worked and make a recommendation to the firm. And they felt like failures because they didn't think any of the ones that they picked would fit, because they had to look at things like pricing, and and I said, that's not a failure, right? Like, you did exactly what it did. And for these clients who don't have like Clio or anything because a lot of those things are add-ons, so if you're not buying the whole universe, right, it can be really expensive to buy piecemeal. But they did make recommendations to the firm that maybe they should look at something more wholesale, because they might not get enough like bang for their buck to just automate this one process, but they might be able to do it better if they looked at other products. The other team looked at, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Georgia's Peach Court, but it's not great. And it's the filing system for most of the counties in Georgia. And it doesn't have any ability to set up trackers. There are commercial vendors like Westlaw, Bloomberg, and Courthouse News that would track it, but they're really expensive. Courthouse News used to allow people to buy really small collections of, like, I just want this local court, the small jurisdiction. Now you have to buy their jumbo package, and so almost every medium to small, and even some large firms have been priced out of it. So they built an app tracker for Peach Court, and they're actually looking to try to actually, after this class, continue to actually try to market it. It's called Ducketed.
So that's all we got. This all came from a paper we have coming out, I think in the winter. It's up as draft form on SSRN. If you want to read it or read more about this, it's in more detail. Click on the QR code, because there's our trendy now. We'd be happy to answer any questions. We'd like a little, but we've got like 7 minutes. We'd be happy to stick around. Yeah.
I was just wondering, do you do anything to sort of like drum up support among students to take this class? Do you do any sort of like marketing to them as to why they would want this?
So, kinda.
The students actually, word of mouth is really good.
Yeah, word of mouth is good, and like so it all kind of flows from the intro to tech and innovation class. Like, I teach this intro to tech and innovation class in the fall, and like we talk about these things, and a lot of Michelle's students flow from that class. 'Cause there's always like Michelle's class was brand new, like it wasn't even out listed when the intro class started, and I kind of like drummed up business from that class, and then a bunch of them took it and were like, oh, I'm really glad I took this class. And then we've had the legal analytics program for a little while now, and year and a half, but like it existed before we took it over.
So a little context. We've had the Legal Analytics and Innovation Initiative for several years now, and the it was just, the only certificate was like a legal analytics coding certificate. And the faculty director decided that she was tired of doing administrative work, and somebody came to me and said, would you be interested in this? And that is how we came to do it. And our goal was, because I was teaching a law practice technology class, and a lot of my students were interested in technology and innovation but didn't want to learn how to code, right? They wanted a different path. And so we tried to set up a different path. We haven't been doing it for very long, but like, sort of took my class and reworked it to make it the intro class. And so, you know, and I'm teaching the last version of my class, and I'm like, hey, by the way, we got the certificate, and because you took my class, that already counts as the intro class. And so there were people who were like, oh, how many other classes do I have to take? And we also, just shameless plug, we have a partnership with Incubator at Baker Hostetler, who has been, they've just been amazing for us, and helping, you know, talking about what kinds of things we should be teaching the students, providing opportunities for them to work with Incubator. So if you have a law firm that you can team up with, I can't say enough about how great they've been they're excited about it, which is fun.
And also the small firms that we worked with in our groups, because even the docketed one, that actually came from a problem that was presented by another small firm. I believe they were a real estate firm. No, they were an insurance defense. And so they were constantly trying to track people, like when they knew that they had had a slip and fall, but they were waiting to alert to actually see if that, you know, insured individual was going to file suit. All the law firms seem really interested. So like, don't be afraid to like go out and talk to them. They have problems, and if you are like, talk to me for 2 hours and like we'll try to like think about it, or hey, can you tell us, like most of them don't have, like the smaller firms, they don't have anyone who has those skills. So they're really happy to tell you what skills are missing in their firm, because they would love for you to send them an associate who had some of those skills for them. And that's a really good way for your students to be able to stand out. Especially like we have a lot of rural, right, students who come from rural areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, two quick questions. One, is the intro course required for all students? And then two, for Michelle's course, can the students get experiential learning credit for that?
Yes.
And the intro class is required for anybody taking the certificate program.
How many students proportionally out of the class would end up taking the intro course then?
Out of like the
First year class?
I think there's usually, I think right now I've got like 26 students enrolled in the intro to tech and innovation class. So we've got like, those are 2 else, like 1 else wouldn't be able to take it. So that would be, we have like 221 else, so 10%.
But they might take it as a 3L2.
Yeah, they can take it as a 3L, so.
We also have a part-time program, so it gets a little like hinky when I ask students like, what year are you? And they're like, I'm like a 4L2P, and I'm like, oh, okay, like, I'm just gonna be here for a minute. Like, I don't know.
But they're also awesome.
They are. Actually, I love our part-time students because they bring so much. Most of them are working, and they're really great in the innovation class because they actually have real life experience. Yeah.
And one of our just graduates, we have the university has seed money for entrepreneurship and innovation, and a team of our students just won 1 of 10 grants out of 180 applicants.
One of them was in my LPE class.
Yeah. So a question?
Yeah, so this is actually from the Zoom Q&A. One of our people wants to know if you have a slide with the outlined courses on it.
Like with the like listed?
I believe so, if that's not
Oh,
what
you
she
mean
needs,
from
she
the
can clarify.
from the map?
We have a slide that shows a map, but they're abbreviated. I think we could probably.
We could upload one.
Yeah, we could probably upload one into it if someone actually wanted to be like, what do all those words stand for?
Yeah.
Like a key to go with our map?
Right.
I thought about doing that. I was like, no one's going to care what all these words mean. But I was wrong. Yeah.
So obviously this specific framework is based around a legal tech course. I'm just curious how you think this could maybe be tweaked to apply to other legal research type courses?
Oh, that's a good good question.
I know Kris asked, why are you here if you're not interested in legal
Right,
tech?
so-
I know you asked it kind of jokingly, but that's why I'm
I
here.
did. I mean, honestly, it's not that different from how you guys mapped out the RML course.
Right, so I also worked for a while. I really like the Delta model, if you're not familiar with that. I think that's a good model too. When I look at the Delta model, I was talking to them about how do I turn this into a legal research, like a Delta and I think you could do the same thing. So we're done. I don't want to keep us going. But yeah, we did sort of do this thing. Patrick and I redesigned our research methods class for legal research and did sort of the backwards design thing. And I do think you could use a very similar model for legal research.
Yeah, we're right at 2 o'clock.
And it's Cali, so there's snacks.
Yeah. Thank you so much.